It's an interesting conversation. I think Rajiv is setting the tone for it. You know, the two extremes of a day, the beginning and end. It's like we're discussing two extremes of influencer marketing. Now, social commerce and influencer marketing are rewriting the rules of customer engagement. We are no longer in a world where the brand dictates. Today, the influencer is actually co-creating the content, is also co-creating the influence of the brand. But with emotions driving virality and data driving decisions, the big question actually remains, how do brands balance the two? And I have a very interesting panel to have this discussion. So let me start by saying that influencer marketing is no longer an experience. And I want to start with you, Rahul, you run a creative team. And when you imagine creative people and strategy people, all you see is swords in between literally. How do you balance creativity, storytelling with data?
I've always felt that good strategy and strong data liberates storytelling. You can tell, it's like the anchor that lets you float around without actually losing your way. And like, for instance, the example we were talking about, which was, for a brand like McDonald's, when we're trying to promote breakfast to the young generation who doesn't wake up, what does the brand do? Become the alarm clock? But instead we went and scoured a lot of Instagram to figure out there are a lot of pictures being posted of the young people having breakfast after a nice long night. Right, so to turn the whole thing to talk about, hey, let's make McDonald's a place where you have your last meal after the end of a fantastic night of partying or a night of, where you've done some really cool work, being the last meal. That's data allowing you to now reposition something and then unleash creativity on that. So it makes your work fresh. The access to that data, otherwise you would do the usual thing about trying to lure people saying, oh, the first meal of your day should be a great one, right? But that doesn't work. So for me, always strategy is what liberates creativity. And good strategy actually liberates creativity. If it's not liberating creativity, it's actually not good strategy, or it's not data that's fresh, or you're not really seeing the data through a new lens. The thing with data is always that if there's so much of it, it really does come back to what do you do with it, right? So I think the people who read it well are the ones who liberate us a lot more.
Interesting. Now I know why my daughter doesn't have breakfast in the morning. Now, you brought a very interesting point about consumer insights, which is absolute pure data. You were trying to understand how Gen Z is behaving, which means someone is trying to understand people like Rajiv and me who actually have breakfast. We are the other side of the generation. That brings me, with a conversation around Uniqlo. You're looking at different segments, right? You're looking to ensure that the brand doesn't lose its impact when you're using an influencer, that it continues to get the data influence that it seeks. At the same time, you're using nano and micro influencers. How do you ensure that the brand doesn't lose its impact when you're using two sides while integrating data of consumer?
Okay, so that's a good question, Nina. And I'd like to add that when we are looking at our influencer strategy, we have to see what exactly it's driving for us in terms of KPI, right? Whereas macro influencers are important to drive top of the funnel, which is reach and awareness. You do need micro influencers to drive your middle and the bottom funnel, which is consideration as well as conversions. So when we are looking at our influencer strategy, it's important to understand what this influencer mix is, and then see that who is it that we are collaborating with, and eventually what is the kind of KPI that we are going after. So if I'm going after a particular, a big celebrity, my KPI for that is the reach that I get from them. And whereas when I'm doing a lot of micro influencers, our goal eventually is, are they driving conversions for us? Are they driving consideration for us? So that becomes incredibly important. But more than that, just to add to what Rahul said, I think it's important, what is the kind of communication what is the kind of content we create with them? And that's where the filter comes of whether the value of the influencer aligns with the value of the brands. So it's not just about getting the influencer, but it's also about getting the right influencer, and can we then create narrative which is more emotional, but at the same time, backed by data and is also driving business metric.
It's interesting, while each one of you are speaking about data, you're also actually at the same time speaking about the emotion and the story. So, which brings me, Rajiv, to you. On one side, there is a need of brand love, which the macro influencer is bringing, like Nidhi mentioned. On the other side is the need of conversion and engagement, which the micro influencer is bringing. But your category, which is so driven by social commerce and the need, and also, Dabur, for instance, as an FMCG category, how do you balance emotion and data? Because for you, it's totally different.
So, horses for courses, basically, right? That's the strategy. Every brand has a different need, and every brand is having some interaction with consumer at a different level of the funnel. And for us, long-term brand building is the most important thing, because, our brands have existed for 140 years, and some of them are very old, and some of them are really new. So what happens with older brands is that, recruitment into the category, that is very important, like for brands like Chyawanprash, where you want to recruit younger consumers. For brands like Honey, you kind of keep engaging with different sets of audiences at different points of time, and trying to basically encourage usage for, say, breakfast, or usage for slimming, or usage for general wellness. Depends on what you're communicating when. Then, there are new launches. Whenever you have a new launch, which is completely new category you got into, like we got into a category of tea. So tea, it's a new category for us, totally new, and we are not known for making tea. So micro-influencer was a very good route to take. So we hired about 5,000 micro-influencers, and we asked them to test out our product and then give their reviews, and it worked very well. That's the only route we took. But for different brands, you have different strategy. Like for a brand like Red Toothpaste, for example, you'll have a mega celebrity like, "Thank you guys for talking so loud. Yeah, guys, can we hear the joke for you guys talking? Thank you." Yeah. Then, brands like Red Toothpaste, where, you have a mega celebrity like Amitabh Bachchan, and then which communicates to masses. Then, when you go down to smaller regions like, say, Orissa, where the brand has become number one, or say south of India, like in Tamil Nadu we are number one, and Andhra Pradesh we are number one, and overall country we are number 2 toothpaste. So we have different communication at a micro level. And to reach the communication, you use influencers primarily to reach the communication. Not so much for social commerce, because what happens is that the cost of fulfillment becomes very, very high. So whenever you do something like, whenever you use D2C, you use only for, say, acquiring data and trying to create your own cohorts, and basically trying to communicate the same brand to them, or trying to communicate a similar brand to those consumers. So that in a nutshell is how we use influencers. But we've been one of the biggest users for influencers. We used to call them celebrities at a point in time. Now they call influencers. So there are big influencers, there are small influencers, all shapes and sizes, Everybody is an influencer. You are an influencer.
I totally believe you.
Yeah, you do?
Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much.
There is an early influencer story, where my mother-in-law would quietly tell my father-in-law कि जब बाई आएगी ना, उसको बोलना कोने की सफाई अच्छे से करना, क्योंकि वो मेरा बात नहीं मानती, आपका बात मानेगी. That I think was the cheapest way of using influencer marketing, right? We used
And
influence.
sorry guys, you were talking too loud, so
effectively.
I had to interject. So sorry.
Yeah, but now again, the third view again gives me data as a very interesting point, right? While all of us are actually talking from a concept of content and emotion and connect, everyone is referring to data at the same time. And that brings me to you, Purva. You know, you're balancing, you're leading a global brand, and but you're sitting in a local context. You know, how MNS is perceived in London versus how MNS is perceived in India is totally different. So your use of influencer marketing strategy is also entirely different. How do you actually plan and balance on that?
I think a very good question, close to our heart, because that is what we have to solve for every day. How are you globally aligned and locally relevant? And you know that in that influencers play a very big role, because what happens is with global campaigns, you do not have the liberty to tweak them, do something on your own. With global brands, you cannot have your own, depending on your local relevance, your own positionings, etc. So how do you tweak the whole thing is through the influencers, where you want to drive the narrative, which is locally relevant, which is culturally relevant for the consumer here, but at the same time maintain the brand identity, maintain the brand values. So influencers do help a lot for us to curate that sort of content where we can align with our global values, where we can align with the brand, the way we speak, the voice, etc. At the same time being very locally relevant, because the influencer brings in the cultural nuance. So that's how we kind of maintain the balance.
Interesting. And as a country, we strongly relate to cultural nuance and we judge very quickly if that is missing. There is one element that I think we should speak about, which is the elephant in the room. And something I want each one of you to respond to, is the influencer becoming bigger than the brand? And is the brand actually being able to dictate or control what the influencer, eventually they are the ones who are telling the consumer what to do. So is the brand's voice eroding? Is the influencer's voice becoming stronger? So whoever wants to start.
I'll take
Yeah.
that first. See, like how Nidhi also said that we have to choose the influencers that relate to our brand value. You cannot go to any influencer just like that, right? So M&S being a brand with certain values, quality, comfort, that fits the ethos of the brand. So you have to seek influencers in their field of expertise who are known for that value creation, known for that quality creation, etc. So for example, we just did our campaign with Sunil Chhetri, because he is someone who is a respected brand in his field of expertise, right? Same we feel for M&S. So that's how, I guess influencer will not become bigger than brand. It is the brand who has to drive the influencers the way they want to.
I just want to add to this, how you use the influencer in your communication, it all that matters. Because, if you use the brand ambassador as somebody who's bigger than the brand, then, you leave that kind of impression. But like, if you use him for what it stands for, like for example, Akshay Kumar we use for some products, which are primarily fitness product, and he's known for his fitness, and he's been propagating fitness for a while. And so it works very seamlessly. Some brands, have a very force fit, so one should avoid that. But so that control is in the brand manager's hand, what do you want to do with the protagonist. And the protagonist has to work for the brand, not other way around.
Yeah, I'll just like to add to that, because as brand custodians, the storytelling lies with the brand. I think influencers are just tools as to how do you get that storytelling out. And then that's why the choice of who we work with becomes absolutely integral. So, we have been discussing this, and I think it just boils down to, for example, at Uniqlo, we take a lot of effort and do a lot of research as to whether they are users of the brand? Have they experienced the brand? When we put them out there, will it sound authentic? Will people believe that they are brand users? So we don't just look at popularity. We also do feel that if something is coming from them, if we are, we are using them for our campaign, will our customers believe the story that is coming from them? And hence, I think that's an important role that marketers have to play in balancing between influencers versus brand.
Interesting. I just want to add another layer for you before you respond to that question. When you recommend influencers, other than, everyone spoke about the value that the influencer has. The value comes from one, the person, but also the numbers, the data that is attached. How do you make sure that the brand remains bigger while you are evaluating it also with the data? So just another layer to that.
So I think I'm going to pull back a little more. All of this comes from how well do you know the brand? How well has the brand defined itself? You find that most amount of confusion happens when the brand itself is very diffused and not very clear about what they are. Once you do that, then I think it kicks in the next thing. Are you looking for branding? Are you looking for brandedness? And there is a difference. Brandedness is when you still feel like it's the brand talking even if I don't put the logo. And branding is just a slapping of the logo. And often I think in a lot of things we end up going for branding over brandedness, right? If you start following that, you start finding that people who fit into your scheme of things, it may be fewer, but they're more relevant. Of course, you're not going to be going and picking up. End of the day, we're still looking for impact, right? So the numbers do play a big role when you're picking someone. But if you don't have someone who fits into the brandedness of the whole conversation, even if that person has numbers, then you're losing the ethos of the brand and going and chasing just a short-term popularity, which could work for the brand, could not work for the brand. You see a lot of brands which are actually very easily replicatable are ones who don't have, they were Me Too brands, they're the ones who do that a lot more because they don't have their own character and defined persona. They go for the short term, okay, the flavor of the month is so-and-so influencer, उसने ऐसा कुछ बोल दिया, सब सुन रहे हैं, people are sharing it. Let's also get and collaborate with them, right? Versus you'll find that the more seasoned brands always want to see that the whole thing works because we all know from recent episodes, right, that influencers can go anywhere, right? And then then it's not in your control what happens. So that's why you got to be deliberate in your choice and not just go by, hey, look, this person is right now got this many shares or this many views, and people are loving the influencer because the consistency is important.
Interesting. I've heard many marketers speak about purchase probability score that they're beginning to use now using AI and data that they're bringing, and like I hear, it's also something that resonates, that both are equally important. The emotion, the content is as important as the data and the brand performance. They're probably closely linked. But what I'm hearing is a lot of discernment, consumers. So, Nidhi, I'll ask you this, that you said, we want to see that the person, the influencer is actually a Uniqlo consumer. What you're also saying is that discernment is also very important as a consumer, even if it is an influencer. And how do you sense discernment contributing to performance? So if it's your consumer and an influencer, how are they adding to your conversions and performance?
Fashion is all about discernment, right? What fashion means to me will be different to what it means to you. What fashion means to people in Delhi will be different to what it means to people in Bombay. So even when we are choosing our influencers or hence using that as advertising, we're also looking at these, using AI or data to see what are the signals that we are getting. How is Delhi consuming fashion versus how Bombay versus how Chennai is consuming fashion. So one is obviously the geo aspect of it, but even lifestyle, because you will have people who are corporate or people who go to work, and hence we know that this is the kind of content they like, or they are consuming more of news-related content, or they are going after LinkedIn. So maybe I collaborate with the LinkedIn influencers if I want to create my workwear campaign. Whereas if I want to create a campaign for my t-shirts, I go to Gen Z, and hence I maybe choose Snap as a medium and attract and find influencers. So I think it's a mix of identifying what is your customer cohort, what is the platform that they are going, and hence who is influencing that platform and that customer cohort. So this is, what we do when we are planning our influencers. So when we are doing a campaign for a category, or even when we are launching in new markets, our influencer strategy will differ basis what is the data that we are getting from that market.
There's so many elements, actually, when you're looking at influencer marketing. And Purva, let me ask you this. When these so many elements, it's impossible to actually sit and think about the multiple elements that get into play. But from discernment comes this view. Is the content ruling, or is the voice speaking the content ruling?
See, I think we believe that the content should rule because, so for example, when we, provide, say, the brief to the influencers or whoever we are choosing, there has to be that brand relevance with what they are saying. There has to be the same tone of voice that we want across influencers. It just cannot be left to the, whims and fancies of the influencers to do whatever they want to do. And in that sense, the content becomes ruling because there is a certain relevance that you want to drive through that content for your brand. So I believe content is the king, especially the platforms that we are talking about, especially where are we using these influencers? We're using on Instagram, we're using on YouTube Shorts, etc. The channels are running on content, right? So it has to be content being the king for any sort of influencer association.
And if it's content, we are, from a legacy media, FEC broadcasting, and a lot of our influencer marketing or strategy actually gets informed by how we have used celebrities in the past. Let me ask you, Rajiv, you've used a lot of these celebrities. Do you actually see some of these influencers becoming celebrities for you in your mass media campaigns?
Smaller influencers becoming celebrities in the mass media.
Smaller, well, let me not define micro, macro, but people who have been identified as influencers, say a Bhuvan, or pick any influencer who is famous.
Of course, so I'll give you one example of one campaign which we did during Kumbh in 2019 or 2018 perhaps. I think it was 2019, whatever these 2 years. There was Earth Kumbh, and we ran a campaign. We made a very nice film about red toothpaste, Dant Snan. And that was such a beautiful film which was made for some 2-3 lakh rupees, and the agency had done a fantastic job, We said, this is such a fantastic film, let's take it on air, on the mass media. And we did that, And similarly, we created, during COVID, a lot of such films were made by people sitting at home, which were basically influencer-led videos. And that went on the mass media because the kind of content they had created. And we didn't have any big celebrity at that point in time coming and shooting for us. But what these small influencers would do is that, they would shoot something on their own. They will sing song, they'll create something, they'll do mixing of everything. And they'll give a product to you, which is usable in, say, on digital medium. And then, since we have a deal with them only for the digital medium, we had to take permission from them for television as well. So yes, of course, it depends on what kind of content they made. But lately, last 1 or 2 years, I've not seen such an example. But pre-COVID days and those days, I have seen lots of such examples. Because I think influencers were also far lesser in number. Right now, I think influencers are perhaps more than 40 million influencers in the country. 4 crore influencers, more than the population of Canada, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm one of them, you remember, right? And the It's interesting. I'm sure the managers of these influencers are now asking for a hell of a lot because your value has suddenly gone far more because you're now a broadcast medium celebrity. You're no longer called an influencer, you're called a celebrity. And therefore, that brings me to my next thought. From a creative perspective, you're working on creatives across media, right? And I think the reverse concept is happening where digital creatives are planned first and then they're going into mass media extensions. Is it the person or the persona that you think of? So data, of course, because when it's the person you're thinking of, then it's data. When it's the persona you're thinking of, then it's Akshay Kumar, Sunil Shetty, Samay Raina. Samay Raina is also a person. So one delinks data and the other is popularity. What do you think?
I think it's the idea, and then depending on what the idea is, you go with what part of that influencer do you want to use. Because at the end of the day, what the brand needs to communicate is the most important. If it needs to be done through the person, we can do it to the person. Of course, we spoke about the brand fit, why it's important. Why not use whichever one is more relevant to what you want to communicate? I mean, that's what it's there for. I mean, if you see that a lot more in the West, where they sometimes use stuff that's happening offline, not in the media. Like, for instance, I don't know if Heinz had done this whole thing where I think it was Taylor Swift who was seen in the game with ketchup and ranch sauce, and Heinz came into the whole thing by launching a brand called Crunch, which is ketchup and ranch. Now, that wasn't the persona, that was actually the person, right? Because she was watching a game. But you use that to your advantage. I think, but it's consistent to the brand, right? And in all ways. So I think they're both up there for you to use. It's about how you use it. It's like everything else we speak about, whether it's AI, whether it's influencer. In a way, they are either a medium or a tool. We have to use it in the way that best benefits the brand.
With that
I just
thought-
want to
yeah.
add something to it.
Yeah.
The only one thing which matters
Yeah,
is business, nothing else.
I was just coming.
Only business, only market share growth, only growth, nothing else. Everything else is just a means to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. And time is up, of course, and I just wanted that one last thought from each one, because what I hear is that whether it's the story or data, both are actually equally important. Because at the end of the day, it's about the numbers. You're as good as the number against your business and your name. What's that one lost thought each one of you have when you're saying balancing emotion versus balancing data? Summarizing for everyone this panel.
I don't know whether there's a balance balance is when you have two things which are opposing, right?
Correct.
I think they're both linked.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a DDB philosophy on the whole thing that a lot of times we want people to act in a predictable manner so that our plans are successful. But unprecedented growth comes from unpredictable ways of behavior. You want a consumer who's following this chart to go and buy something, but you want another person who's not doing the same things, and you want them to behave in an unexpected manner and buy you. That unexpected growth, which is also what's going to be a lot more than predictable growth, comes from creativity. You get people to behave in unexpected ways by disrupting something in their life, their behavior, influencing their behavior, right? So, but to get them to do that, you need to really know them really well, to disrupt something, and that's where data comes in. So it's not a balance. This is what we play with. These are all tools which, it's a streamlined, straight way of working where we use great data to arrive at great thoughts which we express creatively. That's the journey for us.
Nidhi?
So, the way I see influencers are one of the media vehicle in your media mix, right? It's just about how do you get that, how do you get your story out using influencers? And it boils down to, like Rahul is constantly saying, the story that you want to use these influencers for. At the end of the day, influencers are also tools. You use a TV ad or you use a Facebook post, they also create influence. You're just using an influencer as a person. The advantage that it gives is that you can create those story and create those emotions in a much stronger way than you would create with a static post or than you create. I think that's the power of influencer, and that's how you marry data as to who should be the influencer and then content as to what this
Should be the
influencer should
content.
say.
Absolutely, yeah. Rajiv, your last.
बिजनेस होना चाहिए बस
हाँ, he said that.
बाकी सब कुछ बिजनेस है तो इन्फ्लुएंसर है नहीं तो कुछ नहीं
Absolutely. Purva.
No, I agree with him totally. Business hai to influencer hai. So that's why I look at it from a multiplier effect. It's not brand plus performance from an influencer. It's brand into performance, right? We need to have that multiplier effect. And that's when the business hoga.
Yeah. So I think to summarize what I heard is that the consumer remains important, and we always value the discerning consumer, but we also value the influencer bearing in mind, of course, the content, the story that they're saying, and also the value of the value that the influencer has versus the brand values, that there's a match. And at the end of the day, it's all, of course, about business, because whatever we do, at the end of the day, we want to make money. That doesn't go away. So it's impossible to try and link the two. They feed into each other, and you have to do both well. You have to do your content well, and you also have to make sure that you're keeping a close eye on your analytics and data very strongly, right? Thank you so much, everyone. I hope the empty room enjoyed the session, whatever, almost empty, yeah. Enjoyed the session, and thank you for having us and hearing us.